Well, g'day. Welcome to NewHope Young Adults Live. It is great to be with you on this beautiful Sunday afternoon here in Melbourne. My name's Lance. I'm the Associate Pastor at NewHope and I head up our young adult work, and it's a real privilege to be with you this afternoon. If you don't know who we are as a ministry, as a church, we are passionate about Jesus. We believe that he lived an incredible life and he transforms, he changes, he heals people's lives today. And so we're passionate about emulating him in our lives and actually growing to be more like him in all that we do. And so this afternoon, we're going to be talking about some really interesting topics and ideas. Jace, who's here with me, is going to be exploring how we have a heart for the world while we live in the city of Melbourne. If you are wondering whether you're a young adult or not, and whether you're welcome as a part of this thing this afternoon, I just want to say to you, you are welcome. Age is just a number. You're not defined by the number on your birth certificate. You're welcome to be a part of us. We are passionate about anyone who feels young at heart. And so if you like to learn, if you want to grow, if you want to be all that God is calling you to be, hey, you're welcome to be a part of all that we are doing this afternoon. And our real hope for this time is that this would be interactive. It's not just about Jace and I chatting, but we really want you to engage and throw questions into the conversation that we have today, to contribute, and we really want to be led by you. So jump on the chat feed now, post any comments, questions, say hi, maybe send us the latest emoji. You just post it on your phone. Mine's a thumbs up, is my go-to every single time. So why don't you share with us what you engage with in your emojis and be a part of the conversation today. If you haven't set up a YouTube account before, seriously, it takes 1 minute. You just need to set that up to be a part of the conversation, and we would invite you to do that. What we're going to be doing today, Chloe Diving is here with us. She's going to be monitoring the feed throughout our time together today, and she's going to feed in questions and comments from you to Jace or myself as a part of our conversation this afternoon. So I really want to encourage you to jump on, give us some feedback, bit of banter. If you want to make fun of my fashion sense or Jace's, go for it. And Chloe's going to be the mediator throwing some of those questions in. Chloe's with us here at the moment, and she's going to kick off our time together today by sharing just some words of reflection and a devotion to head us off today. So Chloe, over to you to share some reflections with us.
Thanks, Lance. Hey guys. For those who don't know me, my name is Chloe, and today we'll be delving into the concept of how do we generally engage with and be conscious of the needs of the poor and disadvantaged in our world. While we see examples in both the Old and the New Testament of the Lord using people to take care of and have compassion on those who are in poverty and are outcasted, we can sometimes be distanced from that in our world today. In Matthew 25:31-40, the parable of the sheep and the goats, we see Jesus preaching to the crowd that followed him. Verse 31, "When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his glorious throne, and all the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate them, the people from one and another, as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left. Then the king will say to those on his right, 'Come, you who are blessed by my Father, take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you fed me. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me.' Then the righteous will answer him, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothed you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?' The king will reply, 'Truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me.'" While there can be many interpretations of this passage, let's just focus on the sheep and the goats. In the Middle East, during the time of Jesus, sheep and goats looked very similar and were often hard to tell apart. The way to discern between the two is by the way they acted. Goats by their stubbornness and ignorance, and sheep by their obedient and meek nature. Jesus describes God separating the people of his nation into those who have listened and obeyed, the sheep, and those who have disregarded and ignored the word that God has given them, the goats. You are blessed by my Father, he says to the sheep. You have fed me when I was hungry, gave me something to drink when I was thirsty, and invited me in when I was a stranger. This is what the Lord calls us to do. He sees our willingness to serve others, to go and help those who are impoverished, to show love and kindness to the ostracized, for they are the ones who need it most. It's very easy to just see the surface level problems. At least for me, that's true. I can get caught up in my own troubles, the things that inconvenience me. It's hard to sympathise with the truly life-threatening situations that other people face, just because I don't understand it myself. But that doesn't mean we can't go and be educated in order to help those in those places. This is how we bring heaven to earth. Just as the sheep listens to its shepherd, we should listen to and follow Jesus' example and aim to be a group of people who go and seek the needs of others, especially in a time like this. Not to be closed-minded, focus on ourselves and ignorant to the troubles of the world, but to go and serve in whatever way you're called, just as Jesus did. So with that, we'll go back to Lance and Jace and just have a good conversation, have a couple of questions.
Hey, Chloe, that's awesome. Thanks so much for those reflections. I loved what you said about how we are defined, we are identified by our behaviours, by our character, by the way that we live our lives. And hey, if you just want to jump online and just give Chloe some encouragement and some feedback on that reflection, pump up her tyres, that was some awesome stuff, Chloe. So thank you so much for those reflections. And Chloe's going to be, as I said before, moderating all that we do today. So jump online and chat to her. Feed in any questions or comments you've got as Jason and I chat. We would love to engage that and have that lead our conversation together this afternoon. I've got a few questions here for Jace, but really wanting you to contribute and be a part of all that we do throughout the afternoon today. So Jace, thank you so much for joining us this afternoon, being a part of the conversation. We want to just engage together over the question about how we as young adults, young people here in Australia, can genuinely engage and be conscious of the needs of the poor and the disadvantaged around the world. We live in an incredible city, an amazing country, and we can be consumed by all that we see around us. And yet, at this very moment, around the world, there is billions of people that live in environments nothing like what we experience in day-to-day life. And so we want to just talk about that this afternoon. How do we genuinely engage and be a part of all these happening around the world from the position and the life that we live? But before we dive into that, just love to hear a little bit about you, who you are, what you do, family, all of that.
Sure. So, as Lance has said, thanks Lance, I am Jace, and I'm married to the beautiful, incredible Sharani, that some of you may know and have seen around. And we've got two incredible, crazy kids, boys, that's Jarlath and Jahan. As a family, we love Lego, that's a big thing in our house, and we love travel. So Sharani and I have travelled a lot, and then we've taken our kids on the same sort of travel as well, and so we're feeling it a little bit at the moment with the isolation and the lockdown, and in fact we were meant to head off next week for a month, but obviously that's not happening. So yeah, so that's what we do. We're also, the boys and I are Mad Keen Melbourne members, so go D's this afternoon, this evening.
Shame for you guys, isn't it?
No, we can do it. We can do it. That's what D's supporters always say. We can do it.
There's always hope.
There's always hope. There's always hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're very right about your boys. They're full of energy. One thing I love whenever I'm on Zoom chatting to you, I can always normally hear some WWE wrestling in the background, which is
very true. Very true.
Good to hear. Now, you work for an organisation called MPart.
That's right.
Tell us a little bit about MPart, what you do and what it's all about in the work that you're a part of.
Yeah, sure. My role at MPart is as the Director of Marketing. So my job is to tell the story of what MPart does. And so let me tell you that story right now. MPART started 22 years ago by Jossie and Jenny Chaka, who were incidentally on their honeymoon in South Asia. And I'm going to talk about South Asia. I can't talk about specifics online, but it'll give you an idea of what we're talking about. So they were on their honeymoon and they met a kid on the train who was basically living on the train and just eating the scraps and begging on the train. And so they invited him on the journey for the next couple of days as part of their honeymoon, which is, quite interesting in itself. And with that, it started to stir their heart for South Asia as such, which I'll refer to as the field. And so what happened one day is that God gave Jossie a vision. He said, I believe I want to see 100,000 communities transformed by 2030. That's massive. Each community is a village and it's, thousands of people and hundreds of thousands, in fact. 22 years later, already at over 36,000 communities being transformed. And over 1.3 million new stories of hope written. People amazing. Discovering the truth for their lives. But what also about MPART that is amazing for me, and I'll go back a little bit and I think we're going to explore this a little bit, but is that it's not just the vision of seeing these lives transformed spiritually, shall we say, but also physically. And how can those two things can't be separated? You have to take a holistic approach. And so as a result, MPART also has built 16 schools and a school educating about 6,000 students. And just recently with COVID, have been feeding families upwards of 10,000 a day. So during lockdown in this area. So yeah, that gives you a very broad overview of MPART.
So there's a ton of fascinating stuff that we could probably spend ages talking about each one of those things you've just mentioned. But just on that last point, COVID affects us here in Melbourne. We're currently in another lockdown and changing the way that we live. And it's affecting different countries in different ways all around the world. In the field where MPART is working, what's just some of the ways that this COVID moment in history is affecting MPART's work and the people that you work among? Yeah,
sure. So it's a very serious situation in the field. In the field, there are literally hundreds of millions of people who are earning only enough food for that day, earning enough money to pay for the food for that day. So what we call a daily wage earner. So when they went into lockdown, that meant that no one could go out and work. So already, and it literally went into lockdown, I think, with about 3 hours notice. So there was not enough time, even if you had the money, to shore up some supplies and some food and stuff for what was coming. It happened so quickly. And as a result, there were people also that are located a long way from their families. And there was no public transport or anything to get home. So there are so many stories of workers walking home for days on end without food and water, and quite a number of them actually dying on the side of the road. Very sad, incredibly different to what we're experiencing right now. There's no sort of job seeker or job keeper or any of those kind of funding that's happening. There was some element of food provision, but not a great deal. The situation has gotten worse as well in that in this area, they actually charge for the test. And they charge the equivalent of $45 Australian upwards. When you're earning $1 or $2 a day, you're not going to get tested. So you're never going to know, type thing. As well as hospitals, you've got to pay for food and all those things when you get to the hospital, and they're overwhelmed. So it's become a very hard place right now during COVID. So
there's a lot happening, and the workers that you serve in the field are up against a lot of challenges. And we might hear some more about some of the things that's happening and some of the breakthroughs that they've had in their work. But I'm interested, Jace, why you? Why did you decide to work at an organisation like MPART? What are some of the stories in your life that have actually sensitised you to want to do this kind of work and be based here in Melbourne with a focus like that in countries around the world?
Sure. Yeah, it's been a long journey to this. And it's interesting, I'll go back a little bit. I remember even as 9 years old, it was in the 80s. So yeah, I'm a bit older than the young adults group, but hey, I feel welcome, so that's all right.
Young at heart, mate, that's what I always say.
The kids keep me young at heart, for sure. Yeah, so back then, and I remember seeing that kids or people in Poland couldn't get Bibles. And I remember being impacted and knowing that if I gave $5 a month, that meant a Bible for someone in Poland. And so I signed up for this Bible a Month club and sort of, I guess, was impacted then. And that was the very early days of thinking a bit outside of where I was. But as time went by, I got into the corporate world and was enjoying my career and met my wife, Sharon, in the corporate world as well, at work, which was good. We got to the stage where it was, okay, time to head to Sri Lanka and actually meet her parents. So she grew up in Sri Lanka. And I got there at 1 o'clock in the morning on the 26th of December, 2004. If people know that date, that was the day of the tsunami. So I got in there 8 hours before the tsunami hit and woke up the next morning with, all this news of the tsunami had hit in Sri Lanka. To later on know that around 40,000 people lost their lives during that time. My sister-in-law, or future sister-in-law at that time, was PR, or public relations for World Vision Sri Lanka at the time. So she had travelled down the coast very quickly and saw a lot of the images and a lot of things that were happening. As a, dare I say it, as a white guy, as a Westerner that was there, it was like, okay, what can I do, type thing. And a lot of comments of, no, you can't go anywhere because people will see you and they'll want money or stuff like that from you, so you need to stay put and all this sort of stuff. I got involved in World Vision Sri Lanka and just loading trucks. It was great. I mean, I was just at the end, I was the tallest guy in the queue, and I was responsible for putting the blankets up onto the trucks. And there was a massive line of men and women, and a lot of them women, Sri Lankan women, just handing the blankets across until it got to me, so yeah, I could put them up on the truck. And but that experience in itself started to get me thinking, I think, and started questioning my career direction and which way I wanted to go. As a result, once I got back, and it kept stirring in my heart, and we got married and continued on the career until I managed to get a job at Care Australia, which started taking me down the aid and development route. Fast forward a number of years now, my job prior to NPART was at World Vision. So again, had a lot of exposure to the aid and development. Went to Kenya and saw some amazing programs from World Vision. And then a time came when, the job at NPART came up. For me, when I started at NPART, I was like, oh, what am I doing? This is a smaller organization. It's a very Christian organization. World Vision is also Christian, but I want to say that as well. Yeah, with NPART, it opened my eyes to something more. It opened my eyes to the fact that we need the Great Commission, which is a part of our lives, from Matthew 28, 18 to 20, which says to go out, and baptize and disciple nations and things like that. So it had that part, but it also had the good commandment of, love your neighbor, And so, yeah, so when those two came together, I started to see that aid and development on its own, I think many people can get caught up in, and wanting to help people and, but they sort of forget that without the gospel, it's actually quite shallow in the end. So when you see the two together, and the reality was like for NPART, the priority was getting in there and giving the good news to people. And as a result, once they get to know their community that they're in, they see the needs of the community and they go, okay, these guys have no clean water. Can we dig a well, that gets them through the dry season? They've got not toilets. They don't have any hygiene. So let's, build toilets for them. Let's build schools to give them an English education that breaks the cycle of poverty. So, yeah, wow, I've just come that whole journey right now, and That's where I'm at. And that's why I'm there. I went to see the field going, oh yeah, this will be cool. I've been to the field before. I've seen stuff before. I went with Empart and was just like, wow, how could I not work for these guys?
Yep.
So,
And so in this season for Empart, it's the combination of those two things, sharing faith, but answering the practical needs, and COVID's presenting a heap of practical needs.
Heaps.
And so Empart's really uniquely positioned to actually be responding because of the DNA of who you are as an organisation, which is really cool to hear the way God's using your work and your team's work in that space. What's fascinating about your story, Jace, is that you got on a plane to meet a family of the woman you're about to marry, and one of the biggest natural disasters in our generation's memory happens. And so, of course, your story is impacted by that, and God has used that to do a whole lot of things in your life. My experience has been through being exposed to poverty and the hurt in other people's lives, that God has used that to change me. But not all of us will necessarily jump on a plane and be faced with the Boxing Day tsunami of 2004.
I hope they don't.
Absolutely, yeah. What can we do to start to cultivate an attitude and an experience which might allow us to be sensitive, that might allow God to speak to us in ways so that we grow in an understanding and a care for the real situations of people around the world?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think for so many of my generation and a bit older, their hearts were broken during the 80s, during the famine of Ethiopia. Like, it was so full on, it was on TV. There were big music events, that U2 were singing at and stuff like that. So they highlighted that, and a lot of people I know that I talk to now still have a heart for Africa because of what they saw. And Africa's a big place. Lots of different countries, but there is still a lot of famine and poverty and war throughout Africa. So there is, I think, if you think back as well, to Syria is a fairly recent crisis that featured in the news a lot as well, and there was the young boy, the incredibly tragic story of the boy that drowned trying to escape Syria and stuff like that. For me, again, that broke people's hearts and connected them to what is happening around the world without having to be there and to understand. But what I think it's how we respond to something like that is what changes things. So when we see something like that, what do we do with that? Do we just put it in a pocket and just go, oh yeah, that's something that's happened. It was a bit sad. I feel sad by that. Or what I would tend to do, I guess, is to start educating myself about, well, what is this situation? I was at World Vision, so I knew a bit about what was going on in Syria anyway. But for me, it's about learning, looking for sort of things, reading the news, but not just the news, because the news can be quite biased. So I was looking for news that's less biased, perhaps, or more worldly. I find Australian news is very Aussie, and so it doesn't give you a real context of what's happening around the world. For example, did you know that in Peru right now, ventilators aren't the issue for COVID, it's oxygen. They literally don't have oxygen or money to buy oxygen for their hospitals. Yeah. And so that's huge, right? Massive situation. And that in South Africa right now, the people who are dying from COVID are in their 30s to 40s because of HIV being so prevalent throughout South Africa. So these are things that are in the news that you don't necessarily see on the front page, but you have to, I guess, continue to keep an eye out for. What are these things, but also why? Why are these things happening? And so I would look at BBC News more, I think, than Australian news. But I also look at Associated Press, which is less biased version of a lot of news. Al Jazeera is also good to get some different context as well. And then research, and just go, okay, why is this happening? And ask the question, why is this happening around the world?
Yeah. Scott, I want to pick on a few more things that you said there and
Sure.
come back to it. But Chloe, you've got a couple of comments and questions for us.
Yeah, I do, thanks. So we've got one question from Tom. In this time of COVID, what other than giving and offering can we be doing for other people and bringing the word as well?
Nice. Thanks, Chloe. Jace.
Yeah, right here. I think one of the things that, and one of the reasons why we came to New Hope was that I feel like New Hope actually has that same focus as Empart does in their communities. It's about being in the community and understanding the needs of the community and being willing to assist. I think that's a big part. And there have been a number of opportunities of late, I think, with different organizations who are, we had the situation in the flats in the city and stuff like that. There was a lot of news about Muslims or Hindus, getting there and feeding people. I know that there were Christian groups, but they didn't get the media, so that's okay. But that's part of it, and prayer is a massive part of it, obviously. And I think what else, I may as well go into this now, is that there's a situation in the world, and in the field especially, where there is such incredible poverty. There is also such incredible wealth, massive, massive wealth. And there's a person that can be I think one guy built a house that was like 13 stories high with a lift and all this sort of stuff and spent billions of dollars on it. Now, a house like that can have somebody in a lean-to shanty kind of house next to the wall of their house. And they can walk out their door and walk past this family, 5 living in one little room and one little space, and they're starving. And they can walk past and they will go, that's them, that's their lot in life. That's just how it happened. And this is my lot in life. I've got billions, so I'm fine, I don't need to do anything. And I know when I was telling Lance this story, it sort of really dawned on me, and I think I was convicted of it as well, is that we do it as well. In our community, we often will walk down the street or we'll know someone who has a mental illness or something like that, and we'll sit there and go, well, that's their lot. I'm fortunate that I don't have that. This is my lot. And we often don't respond. So for me, in this situation with COVID, Tom, it's about seeking God first and saying, God, show me what breaks your heart and how I can respond to that during this time. So show me the people that need help. Show me the ways that I can serve them so that they might, there might be an opportunity to hear the gospel, as well through that. But it's not always about the words either. You may not need to say anything about the gospel. Your actions in themselves can often lead towards that.
Yeah, that's good. I reckon some of what Jace has said to us about working hard on what you're feeding in, what you're exposing yourself to, and then actually letting things sink in and talking to God about those is really significant in a time like this. We can filter and determine, the narrative we expose ourselves to. But if we actually expand our horizons and open up what's being input, I think that's significant and matters. And then to sort of pick up on some of what Jace said there, I reckon significant moves that impact lives and change the world are 1+1 sort of things. It's doing the right thing in small moments where no one will notice, no one will pat you on the back for it, but continuously and consistently through your life, looking for the small ways that you can bless, serve, and care for another. And I think that cultivates an atmosphere and a heart in us that allows God to prompt us towards other things. And so there might be someone in your life who just comes to mind, who you think, maybe in need of someone just giving them a call this week, checking in on them, seeing how they're going. There might be a small act of just blessing someone this week that it actually matters. It's not just a coincidental thing that's a good thing to do. I actually think God does incredible things through the multiple small decisions that we make to bless another. So it's an awesome question. Tom, thanks so much for that. And like Jay said, I think when we lean in with prayer, that's also a significant part of all that we do as Jesus followers. Chloe, you got some more questions? Fire away.
Yeah, thanks. We've just got one here from the lovely Laura Blythe. What has Empart's response been during COVID? Have communities asked for any particular forms of help, or is it difficult to know how to serve? Is there any stories of Christians or others on the ground serving?
Very good. From the very lovely, beautiful, amazing Laura Blythe. Thank you.
Yeah, wow. Empart, it's been amazing. For an organisation that has often been under the scrutiny by the government for what we do, Empart was invited to basically respond. So they're utilizing schools as distribution centers, but we have 8,000 field workers that are out in communities. And the NPART model is to support them for 7 years until they establish that community. And then they should have, by that stage, have enough support. During this time, obviously, all that support has disappeared. And so there was a real need to give them funding during this time so they could keep their families alive, but it was almost so we could give to them and then through them into their communities as well. The staff, just even the staff that are in the office, like from the media and comms team to the finance team, have been out. I would say a lot of them got special permission to be out during lockdown, and I've seen amazing videos of how much food they're distributing, in their communities, in remote communities that people are not getting to. So they're doing 2-hour drives across some of the roughest land ever to get out there and to feed these communities and give them enough to survive. And so that continues. We just got word this week that 2 of the cities where our main offices are have gone back into lockdown. And that's making it very difficult. But, and a personal friend of mine who I traveled with when I was in India in March, just before I got back, half an hour before they started locking us down, he wasn't able to get married. He was meant to get married in late March, but his fiancée was living in a different state, so quite a number of hours away. So instead, he was distributing food, and he was just working. I got word from him this week. He got married, I think, last Monday. So that was pretty exciting news. Yeah. But during this time, it's been... Some of these field workers are in communities that would ostracize, they would beat them, they would want to kick them out of the communities and stuff like that. But during this time, they've been able to serve those people that have previously done that. And that's broken those people, I guess, to the gospel, to the good news. And people are responding that would never have normally responded. So it's this incredible, unique time where God is moving in a way that's just impacting millions through not just NPART, so many other organizations. One thing to emphasize as well with NPART is that it is all national staff. We don't send any missionaries over there. They're all from their communities or around their communities, and they are being trained up over there and sent out. So there's no Westerners or anything in the field at all.
Yep. So I want to pick up a couple of things that you've said so far, Jace. You mentioned about expanding our horizons and looking at the media that we are engaging with. You shared then some amazing stories of great things that are happening on the ground. One story from me, you actually challenged me with some of this earlier this year to be aware of what media you're looking at, and so I did some digging around and saw some stories of people that in those lockdowns that happened in 3 hours needed to walk 1,600 kilometres back to their family from the city where they were walking. And one particular story of a father, his wife, and I think it was a 4-year-old son on his shoulders, about 500 k's into a 1,600 k journey, with $5 in their pocket, knowing they didn't have enough money to get home, but having no other option. They either die in the city or they risk it and run the risk of dying on the side of the road trying to get home. It moved me seeing that story. One of the things that I think we can do is hear all of this stuff and say, right, I get it. What I should do is just reduce the amount of focus I place on the things that I'm putting my energy into in my life. I should care less. Perspective is about caring less about the things that cause me stress and anxiety in my life. What would you say to that? If any of us watching a part of this conversation today are thinking, right, I should care less about uni, less about family. Is that the way that we engage well in the issues of the world?
No. Short answer is no, that's not it. I don't think that's a good way. I think what this does is it changes your response to things. It doesn't mean you don't respond to things or that you don't have them in your life, but it might change your response to them. I mean, we have cars, we have, a house, and we've got these amazing things. And I've got the advantage, I guess, in that I work for an organization. So I'm there, dealing with some of this sort of stuff from my perspective. But what this does is, knowing about this as well, I want to caution people, don't let things overwhelm you either. Because it can tend to, if you get too much into it, it becomes overwhelming because it's such a big job, and we can't do it. We can't do all of it, and Australia can't do all of it. And, it's coming down to the individuals that are doing it and how God does things. So when it comes to putting aside university or study or anything like that, I don't think we're called to do that. I don't think that, God is saying drop everything. There might be times, when God says drop everything and go and do this. This is the way that this is the assignment I have for you right now. But most of the time he's called you to that assignment in the first place. He's going, here's your assignment for right now. Continue on this. Where I'm going, I guess, with this is that we have lives that we live, and we do what we can for where we're at. But to know about the things that are happening adds to that. It doesn't sort of distract you from what you're doing in life, but it adds to your life, it enriches. Because what we see when we talk about these overwhelming situations is that then you look at what's actually happening in those countries and in the field. So in Syria, there were some amazing stories. World Vision had camps set up literally 5 kilometers from Mosul, which was one of the most bombed cities there. And kids and parents and everyone had to flee, but they had to flee through a minefield to get to World Vision. But one of the best things that World Vision did, I think, is that they had a safe space for kids. And kids could come and they could just play, because when you're in the middle of war, how often do you get to do that? But it's not just World Vision that does it. I mean, locally, there are so many, like the Sri Lankan response to the tsunami was incredible. They cancelled all of their New Year's Eve parties, which are a big deal in Sri Lanka, like a big deal. And everybody donated the tickets, which was, 150 Aussie dollars towards the tsunami response. And so, the Sri Lankan community, I saw how much they responded to this and to the aid and development. There were so many awesome stories of people, going over and above the normal and the response. So a situation like it is in the field doesn't need us to be there to change anything. There are people there. The people that are doing the work, the field workers there, they're often quite isolated and they're on their own and they're doing what God has called them to. And one of the biggest things that impacts them is hearing from here that we're praying for them, that they've got family on the other side of the world that is thinking about who they are and is thinking about what they do and they're praying for them. So I think that's the biggest thing that we can bring into our lives is praying for people around the world so that they're not isolated, that they feel a part of the global community, I guess,
Yeah. One of the things that I think about in response to that is perspective on our lives here in Australia is not about the shrinking of my responsibilities. There's no good if I want to shrink my responsibility to my family at home. That does no one any good. It's not about shrinking my anxieties and stresses, but perspective is about broadening my horizons, widening the pond. My responsibilities stay the same size, but if my scope and my understanding of life in this world is growing, perspective then puts things more in order. I think I become more of who God's calling me to be, and I engage more in the work that He's doing in this world. And so I'd want to encourage anyone that if you ever feel like I just need to care less about the things that are happening in my life, that would be the right thing to do. I reckon that's the wrong path. I think broadening your horizons to allow more space for God to speak to you is something that's a profoundly empowering way to live your life in response to some of the things that we're chatting about now. Chloe, here to start with another question.
Yeah, thanks, Lance. We've got another one from Tom here. He's just wondering if there's some things that we can be praying for MPAT and for your mission.
Yeah, as I think I've touched on already, there are so many field workers that are currently very cut off, I guess, from the rest of the community. What would normally happen and what they would look forward to is that every 3 or 4 months they would come together for a regional conference where they'd meet with all the people they'd gone through their training with, and they'd connect and they'd get fed, and it was, for them, it was their holiday. Like, that was their vacation. They don't have holidays very often, or holidays that look like ours anyway, at all. And they would consider this time, and now we can't do it because it's, you know, it's because of lockdown and everything's online. So they're feeling very isolated. But, you know, they know what, during this time, it means that they've been able to connect more. They've slowed down the pace of being out there in the village or in the community all the time, and they're spending more time at home, and they're spending more time in the Word. And so they're learning and they're understanding and loving that. But there's also, and you know, if someone, the other way that we can help, and Lance and I talked about this as well, you know, Australia is one of the 10 wealthiest countries in the world. And we have issues here. We do, our farmers, my dad's a farmer, so I know that, you know, the farmers have had it tough. The fires were tough as well. For me, though, we're so wealthy that we can do both. We can give to that and we can give to something else, and it won't impact us massively. And so there's always that fact of, you know, identifying what God wants you to support, whether it's financially or through prayer, because there are so many things out there that you can support and do. And there'll be things that God will align you for. But I think one of the biggest things is to do is to go, hey, God, what breaks your heart, you know, and allow it to break mine. Because when you break my heart, then I will have more of a passion, and I'll be more enthusiastic, and I will be more interested in supporting that. And so if you show that, then I can follow that. I think that's a big part. There's actually a song by Brandon Heath, I think it's called, that goes down this word, a lot of those lines of show me the people around me, that how they're thinking, how they're feeling, how they're hurting, whether it's here or it's overseas, you know.
Yeah.
And then how do I respond?
Yeah. So prayerfully seek God to break your heart, lean into the things that really matter there, and then just respond and follow that. It's not about, I'm an overseas person, I'm
That's
a bushfires person. I love what you said. Why not both?
Yeah, why not both?
God's big enough to invite us to respond to the needs that he places before us. But Jace, what I'd love to hear from you is, why does all of this matter? So in one sense, I could be like, oh, well, it's a good thing to lean in and to care, but why? Because I could live a good life as well, you know, dabbling and holding things at arm's length. Why lean in to let my heart be broken for the situations in this world? But what's the underlying point of everything that we're talking about today from your perspective?
Yeah, that it draws me to a conversation I had with Jarlath, my son, recently. He's 6 and he is very much into superheroes. He loves superheroes. That might have been a little bit of my influence on that, but you know, he's mad keen on it. And one day he asked me, he goes, why are bad guys bad guys? And why are superheroes superheroes? And it was something that I really believe that God just gave me in the moment to respond to this as a teaching moment. You know, it's like proud dad moment, kind of go, yep, tick this one off for a change. I've done all right with this one. But what I came to is that bad guys only think of themselves in the world. They're always thinking about power, they're always thinking about money, they always want more. And so they're doing whatever they can take to get more for them. And it's only thinking of themselves. And then when you look at the superheroes in this, they are only thinking of others. So they're out there to save people from these bad guys because they care for people. And so what that led to is, you know, who's the ultimate superhero? Is that Jesus died on the cross for everyone out there. And when you think about that and you think about the gospel and who we're called to be, it is to think of others. It was actually quite funny one night at small group when the kids, we just have to let them go talking a lot because they share a room. And we all overheard Charlie telling Jehan, his brother, that no, Christians only think of others. And I'm like, yes, Yes, that's what we want to hear. But it's true for us, right? This is the journey that we're on. It's learning more and more to be like Jesus. And Jesus thought of others always, and always first. And so, the Bible says, love thy neighbor. And so I think that builds in you more of the character of Jesus by expanding yourself to think of what are these other situations around me where I can be aware. Yeah,
That's good. I love that. Scripture says in a few places that humans, we are wired towards ourselves. We're wired to think selfishly. And so unless we intentionally do something to change that, unless we intentionally work on being selfless and thinking in this way, we're bound to think selfishly.
Yep.
And God is a selfless God. In Jesus, he came and joined us, become one of us, and did that with a heart towards us. It wasn't a selfish act of God, it was a selfless act of God. And we become more like the God that created us. We become more like Jesus when we actually cultivate selflessness in us, in who we are. And so it really matters, doesn't it? We need to actually pay specific and intentional attention to this. I've just got a couple more questions. We're going to wrap up in a few minutes' time, so quickly jump on board if you've got a question that's pending. But Chloe, you've got something waiting for us.
Yeah, thanks. So we've got a question here from Allegra. How do we respond to those around us who don't necessarily want to lean into knowing about the brokenness around us?
Great
That
question.
is a great question.
Allegra.
How do you respond to that?
Why don't I say a couple of things? You can think,
Go
give us
for
some
it.
wisdom and fix up my errors. I reckon you can't push anyone. So everything that we are chatting about now and laying out here for you, you have to choose whether you're going to do anything with it. It's not up to me or Jace or Chloe. And so all that we can do is present an opportunity for someone to respond to anything. And they have to themselves choose. I think then secondary to that, if somebody doesn't want to lean in, they don't care, it is about how we respond. So if we respond with condemnation, judgment, anger, I think we can further cement unhelpful ideas and practices in people's lives. And I wonder when we look at politics around the world, the kind of polarising of people, I think this is what happens. We disagree with someone, so we throw rocks at them, and I think it further embeds a polar opposite view. But I reckon when we say, you know what, you might not be interested in this, you might not be passionate about it, but I'm going to walk the journey with you anyway. And I'm going to show you the way that this is influencing my life, the ways that this is changing me. I think that has an impact on people. And we've got to remember, your goal may not be to get someone from zero to hero in a day, but if there's small movements of progression in somebody's sensitivity and care towards another, if somebody becomes slightly more selfless because of your presence in their life, I think that's an awesome thing. And I think you've contributed something of health and something of their God-given identity to someone if you can have that sort of influence on them.
Yeah, absolutely. I think about, I've got family that are not as engaged in this as what I am, and there have been some challenging conversations. But I think, as Lance said, not to avoid, because then you build this echo chamber around you. And it means that you don't test or challenge what your thinking is either. You only like to hear from people who agree with you and are doing the things that you're doing. Whereas others, it's, as the Bible says, iron sharpens iron. It's the rough parts of people that will sharpen you. It's also important not to have a "I'm better than you" kind of approach to this. This is where God's working on my heart right now. And so this is what I'm looking at, and this is how I'm being tweaked, sharpened for what God intends for me. And a person might be at a different place, but it's good to always, I guess, challenge gently. I think just to sometimes it's by action more than word. Let them see what you're doing, let them see what you care about, and that will often get them thinking. Dare I say, even with Lance and I talking about, Empart early days, there was a lot of things that I was talking about that, Lance hadn't heard about. So, these kind of things, you don't know how someone's going to respond when you talk about it. God doesn't necessarily respond in their hearts immediately either. So at that time, there might be a big barrier up, but, 3 or 4 weeks later, they may come back and say, hey, this actually moved me, challenged me.
Yep.
So.
Awesome. Hey, great question, Allegra. Thank you so much for that. We might head to a landing in a couple of minutes' time. Chloe, is there any last words from you that you want to throw in to the conversation?
Thanks for all who put in their questions online. It was really great. Thanks to Lance and Jace for answering all their questions. It was a really great insight into how to engage and empathise with those who are really struggling in our world.
Awesome. That's great, Chloe. Thank you. Jace, final word, just practical things. So I want to engage more. I want to be more sensitive to the needs of people around the world. Recap on some of the things you've shared with us, but just practically, what are some things that I can engage with next as we finish up this conversation?
Sure. The generation right now has something that generations before haven't had, and that's Facebook and social media and Instagram and all the things that you guys use these days. And in that, there is so much more access to information. And there are some incredible organizations that are doing some great work, like OM and Open Doors and Voice of the Martyrs. And look at their stories and you'll see the stories of hope, because they tell stories of hope about what's happening in the world. So as you start to learn that and listen more and watch the news, again, just come back to asking God, how should I be responding to this? It's an interesting thing for me now when I watch Saving Private Ryan, which is one of my favorite war movies. God's kind of not switching off the see what I see kind of moments. And so it can actually be quite upsetting sometimes when you see some of the scenes in the movie that just go, hang on, when this was really happening, what was God seeing in this? And so just let yourself be moved by God, because the more you're moved by God, the more you learn about his character and who he is, and you will recognize his voice more and more through life. So, yeah.
Love that. Let our hearts be broken, seek after him, and then follow the places that he guides us to. Jace, thanks so much for sharing what you've spoken about today. I've loved the conversation, loved hearing of MPart's work, and continue on in what you're doing. It's really important, it really matters. And thank you for sharing your stories and your heart that encourages us and strengthens us and leads us to do something next in our own lives. Chloe, thank you for your involvement and feedback and a part of the conversation today, and your awesome reflection to kick us off at the start. And to everyone watching, it's been great to engage with you. Thank you for being a part of this. We're going to be back in 2 weeks' time doing the same thing, having an interesting conversation to engage you in your faith journey. And so in 2 weeks' time on Sunday afternoon, we'd love you to be a part of that, to tune in and engage with us. We as a young adults community, our foundation is small groups. We believe that to grow in faith and in health with Jesus, you've got to journey with some other people. And so I want to encourage you, if you're a part of one of our groups, to just deeply invest in that group through this time. We've got 11 groups as a part of our Young Adults Network. And if you're not in a group and would like to be, get in contact with us. You can do that through our webpage, newhope.net.au, and join a group through there. Or you can contact me, and I'd love to connect you in to one of our groups. If you want to engage with Jace, more questions that you'd like to pose to him, if you don't have access to him on social media or anything like that, feel free to contact me through our info@newhope.net.au email address, and I'll connect you up with Jace. Last thing that I want to share with you. What are you going to do next? What are you going to do? We are followers of Jesus. We don't just academically believe in him. It's not a historical belief in a guy that died on a cross 2,000 years ago. It's not a belief system in our head. We follow Jesus. And so what he says, what he does, it influences us. It should change us. It should lead the way that we live our lives. And so from the conversation today, what stood out to you? What has actually grabbed your attention and caused you to think and maybe run off on another tangent and become distracted from the conversation Jace and I have been having? Pay attention to that, because there's every chance the voice of the Holy Spirit is present and leading you and calling you forward there. We're called to be followers of Jesus, and so we should be transformed and changed and be listening to the promptings that he places in our lives. Hey, it's been great to engage together this afternoon. You have an awesome Sunday afternoon. I look forward to joining with you in 2 weeks' time when we do this again. But look after yourself, and we'll see you soon.